just the opposite.
High fly ball, deep left field. Oh, 27 does it again.
Gone. Fernando Tatis Jr. with a 2-run shot has the Padres on the board.
Go. That's his 11th home run. Driven out to deep center field. Going back, Springer turning, looking, see ya. Oh, what a shot by Judge. The Yankees lead 1-0.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 43 of the Free Baseball Podcast. It's January 4th. It's 2023. It's a new year. Most importantly, it's Wednesday, my dudes. Got a lot to talk about baseball-wise. Yeah, I know you'd like that. Some stuff happened all throughout the year of baseball, so I thought it'd be cool that we do, a little year in review. We got some stuff to talk about just from the last couple of weeks, days perhaps even. Just run it down. Big news today, especially the Red Sox extended Rafael Devers for 11 years for $331 million. There are no opt-outs in this contract, and there is no trade clause, which is kind of a rarity now. You're seeing in these big extensions and big contracts being handed out to stars, no trade clause for Rafael Devers. One of the game's brightest young stars locked up for the foreseeable future.
They needed to do it too.
Yeah,
If Chaim didn't pull this off, I think this would have been his last year in charge in Boston. So this was sort of the big thing everybody was waiting for. I know you had your hopes way up high that he would somehow get traded to the Cubs or something. That didn't come to fruition, unfortunately for you. But Red Sox fans have got to be happy to keep Devers around town, especially with some of the other big stars leaving town recently. Most notably Xander Bogaerts this offseason was probably a big blow to Red Sox fans losing him. So at least they'll get to keep Devers. I think Devers is better than Bogaerts. He's really one of the best hitters in all of baseball, and he's still super young. He's only going to be 26 this year, and he's already been in the major leagues for 6 seasons, which is crazy. Throughout his career, he's had a 123 WRC plus, but last year he had a 141, which was a career high. Just like an incredible all-around hitter. He doesn't strike out too much. He hits for a high average, hits for a lot of power. He's a pretty solid fielder at third base. I know he's really made a lot of improvements there, and that's why he deserved this massive contract, which I think is it's at least top 10 biggest contract of all time. 11 years, 331. You said that's a big deal, and he's going to be there for a long time. And I think he's more than deserving of that kind of money. And I think the Red Sox fans will be very happy to keep him around town. And we'll see a lot of him and Masataka Yoshida for many years to come.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think you're spot on with the fact that, this felt like Chaim had to pull the trigger and get Devers extended no matter what it costs, or it was going to be his job. I really think so. I did want him to fit with the Cubs, and who knows, maybe a bunch of other teams made offers, but if I'm Chaim Bloom too, there's no way I was picking up the phone, because he had to know, lose Devers, I'm gone. But yeah, this is good for Red Sox fans who have kind of seen their team get dismantled the last few years and just get consistently worse and not really have much hope of getting a whole lot better. But now you at least get to keep Rafi Big Scoops hanging out over at the hot corner and Fenway for the foreseeable future. There is no trade, so I mean, maybe they're going to turn around and just flip him right now, which would be the stupidest move in baseball history.
Do the Rockies thing. The
Rockies, one year and get him out of here.
That's still so insane. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that the Red Sox also traded Mookie Betts. So it's really been they become like the sort of like the high end version of the A's, where they just build up crazy stars and they're like, oh well, bye.
Don't need these guys anyway. But Just a few notes on the contract. This is the longest and the richest contract in Red Sox history. 11 years, $331 million for Rafael Devers. This also leaves him a little bit of money to try to get a couple extensions done in-house and potentially have some more money to spend next year in free agency without still hitting the luxury tax. I think it's right around 70 million, 74, 75, I want to say. I don't know if that's right or not. But this does keep them under the luxury tax for now, and they still have some breathing room, which you'd have to expect them to try to be big players next year. I don't know who would really want to join this team, but I don't know. I mean, they got Devers to extend, they got Yoshida to sign. Never know. But moving on, no more extensions. For now. You know how they like to do stuff right after the pod goes off. Got some transactions to talk about. Speaking of third base, former Giant Evan Longoria signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks, staying in the NL West. It's a 1-year, $4 million deal. It's got $1 million worth of incentives baked in there as well. Evan Longoria, kind of, in the latter years of his career, definitely looking like the twilight of his career at least. But he signs with what will most likely be pretty young, exciting Diamondback team. He didn't really play a whole lot last year. He's kind of been injured, but he was pretty solid when he played. I mean, he was worth 1 WAR in like 90 games, a little over 1 WAR. Posted a 115 WRC plus. You watched him more because you're a Giants fan. So what are your thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I also had him on a fantasy team. So I was definitely invested in him more than many other people would be. This is a pretty interesting signing because they do have openings at designated hitter, so he doesn't really have to worry about fielding, and maybe that will keep him healthier than he was with the Giants the past couple of years. But I think the biggest thing to remember about the current Longoria is that he's sort of had a rebirth over the last couple of years. If you remember, we definitely talked about it earlier in the year at some point, I think. His StatCast numbers have blossomed since he joined the Giants, which was, part of the whole Farhan thing. Once he took over, the team got super analytically focused. And I think Longoria definitely took advantage of that. His barrel rate has just skyrocketed. It's been above 12% for the last 2 years. It was 12.4% last year, and his hard hit percentage rose as well. So his expected StatCast metrics are pretty solid because he hits the ball really hard when he does make contact. I think that's the biggest is that if he does make contact, because last year he struck out 28% of the time, which was by far a career high, which is not a good thing. But, he's been at least 15% above average the past couple of years. And if you can do that for the Diamondbacks, that's going to be very solid for $4 million. And, they're not going to be super competitive. So I don't think they're going to be relying on him or anything. So right now, I think it's just, you get a veteran presence in there. Hopefully he can teach some things to some of the younger players there and maybe keep some of them off their feet and provide a little bit of thump in the lineup. But, I don't think the Diamondbacks are going to be competing at all, but it would be cool for Longoria to continue to have a little bit of success in the twilight of his career, because he is an outside shot at a Hall of Fame candidacy.
I was just going to bring that up. I mean, he's been a guy that's kind of struggled a little bit with injury in the latter part of his career. And I think that has hampered what was almost bound to be a Hall of Fame career, because a lot of his numbers are similar to Scott Rowland's, who we might talk about in a future podcast. But Scott Rowland obviously on the ballot and one of the favorites to get inducted. But there was a lot of parallels to be made with Rowland as well. He's just struggled with injury and honestly just a little bit of inconsistency as well. I mean, the Rays moved on from him and he was, struggled for a year or so. And then, like you said, Farhan came into the Giants, and then it's like he just completely changed. And then it's just the health issues have kept him away. But he's going to be 37 this year. His projections look not great, but you never know. There are just projections, and that's not what a player is. It's just what you think they might be. So hopefully all the best for Evan Longoria so he can continue his chance to make it into the Hall. Another kind of smaller move, but this was one of the big flyers, I think, still left in free agency. The Nationals signed Dominic Smith, also keeping him in the division. I'm going to ride that stupid theory that players just want to stay in the same division. Dominic Smith, former Met, one of their top prospects. They signed him to a 1-year, $2 million deal. It's got $2 million of incentives baked in there as well. And they have some easy spots to plug him into that lineup. I mean, their outfield is garbage. I mean, the Nationals themselves are garbage, and then first base, they're gonna what's the plan? Still kind of log jam Joey Meneses there, or what's the plan? So they really need to get Dominic Smith some consistent at bats, which has been Mets fans' biggest gripes for years. And then they got him some consistent at bats, and he sucked a little bit, and they're like, okay, we're done with him now. But yeah, I think this is one of the bigger flyer guys in free agency. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I definitely still think he's got a lot of potential, but it's fading fast. I think
Right.
if he's not successful this year, it might be over for him, unless he like does a whole I'm going to the Dodgers or the Astros and figuring everything out. But that 2020 campaign where he had a 166 WRC plus after having a 134 WRC plus in 2019 with the juice ball, those definitely seem like outlier campaigns because he's got an even 100 WRC plus for his career now, suggesting that the rest of his seasons are weighing down those incredibly successful offensive campaigns. So he doesn't have defensive value. He's going to be like a first base DH type who's going to, like, I don't know, slug around in the outfield if they really need him to. But it's really just about getting him the opportunity to have at bats, like you said, and the Nationals can provide that because they suck.
Yeah, they're absolutely miserable. It's a 1-year deal, so the Nats really, it's no harm, no foul. They're never going to sign anybody now to a long-term deal. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the power in the bat in general was just miserable. Last year, he had 152 plate appearances. He only got 26 hits, no dingers, and that's supposed to be his big calling card. It's supposed to be a slugger, no dingers. Yeah, I think like you said, it's last chance saloon, or it's going to be Korea for him, would be my guess. Where he'll go turn into Eric Thames probably. But yeah, really no harm, no foul. And here's another guy. The Royals traded Ryan O'Hearn to the Orioles.
Bro, you can't just say Korean Eric Thames like that. That guy was so crazy. We need to do a whole episode on that. Oh my God.
In the future,
his numbers there were insane.
He had a season where he had like 48 home runs and he had like 170 RBI, and he had like 360 or something stupid.
Look it up. Now you're
gonna make me look it up. Look it up on BREF. It was dumb. But speaking of sluggers, where it's getting to be last chance saloon, the Royals traded Ryan O'Hearn, who's now kind of log jammed away from first base because of the 2 Italian stallions that the Royals have. They've traded him to the Orioles for everyone's favorite player, cash considerations. Ryan O'Hearn is a baseball player, and there's not really a whole lot else to say about him. He strikes out all the time. That's just his big deal. He just can't stop striking out. He's 29 now. I don't know what this move is for the Orioles, because it seems like they're consigning themselves to be bad again.
Yeah.
They're
just like, oh, let's trade for a bad player.
I just don't get that either, because last year they made the Cinderella run to almost be a playoff contender. And then it's like, okay, anyway, let's go back to sucking a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a baseball move. A guy got traded to a team, and I don't really think there's much else to say about it.
No, I'm not too high on Ryan O'Hearn. I don't think there's much left in that bat. But if they can figure it out, I think he can showcase a lot of power, because in his debut 2018 campaign, he had a 153 WRC plus across 44 games, and he hit 12 home runs. So there is a possibility that he could become an above average hitter, but that possibility is not likely. Eric Thames, going back to that, 2015 with the NC Dinos, he batted .381 with 47 home runs and 40 steals.
140 RBIs too.
That's insane.
Did you also see that he walked more than he struck out that year?
Yes, and then he followed it up with a 40 home run campaign the following year, batting .321. But that 1 year batting .381, 47, 40 is, oh my God, that's just ridiculous.
He had a .216 WRC plus that year.
God, it's not even fair.
Yeah. Eric Thames in the KBO was a freak.
He had that one crazy month with the Brewers when he first came back over too. Right. That was sick. I loved Eric Thames during that time. He looked so cool.
He did have the pretty sick beard and the tattoos. Like, yeah, that's a cool awesome baseball guy.
I know, he looked so cool.
The Brewers always pissed me off because they had Thames, who was cool, and Prince Fielder, who was cooler. Like, Prince Fielder was the man. Like, that sucks. But
I was so disappointed when he signed with the A's prior to 2021 and then didn't play.
Yeah, that's so bad. We have talked about plenty of first basemen who are bad and washed and all sorts of things, and let's talk about another one. The Chicago Cubs signed Eric Hosmer. I almost said Eric Thames, but like, oh, that's cool. They signed Eric Hosmer. It's a 1-year deal worth the league minimum. He's making anywhere around like $720K. Doesn't matter. He's making almost no money. Padres are still paying him a ton. Yeah, I mean, this is also a baseball move, and I want to hear your thoughts about it before I talk a little bit more about it, seeing that that's my team and I kind of have a different slant on it. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on Hosmer just in general?
I mean, I first thought you were messing with me like 10 minutes ago when you were telling me that
Yeah,
he's
no.
making the league minimum. I didn't think that was possible because he is worth a lot more than that. And you said, well, he's like making all this money from the Padres deal. I'm like, yeah, why does that matter? He could still get more money. So I don't know. I guess he really wanted to sign with the Cubs. That's a fair enough reasoning. I think Hosmer has long been overrated. I think on all sides of the ball. I think he was always considered one of the better fielding first basemen when that was never the case. His defensive WAR numbers are insane. He has negative 165 runs below average as a as a defender at first base, which is insane that he's won multiple gold gloves there. So yeah, he's a bad fielder. He's always been like, he's had like 3 above average offensive seasons, 3 or 4, I guess you could say. And other than that, like nothing. So he's sort of like an up and down guy. He's very inconsistent with the bat. I think he's around league average. Like he's got a 107 career WRC plus. And I think that's about what he is, 105. And now he's going to be 33 next year. So I'm really not expecting much out of him. I guess having him as like a clubhouse guy is good, and this is the way to do it. When the Padres did it and they gave him so much money, that was not the way to do it, because that holds you back in other areas by having him locked down at first base and having him making all that money. But the Cubs right now are giving him the minimum, so it's like it doesn't even matter if they're like, oh, he's awful and he's not too cool, so like let's get rid of him. But like right now, I guess it'll be nice to have that. And they sort of needed a left-handed bat there at first base, and it doesn't really impede on Matt Mervis or anybody else getting all the at-bats that they need.
So, like, there's some weird value that Hosmer provides, and I don't know if you've looked at him, but he's a reverse splits guy. He was a reverse splits guy last year. He destroyed lefties, which is very weird because he was really good against lefties. He hit like 324 against them. He hit for more power against them, which makes no sense, which is also weird because Matt Mervis, who is the top first baseman candidate, is a reverse splits guy against righties. He's a right-handed hitter that matches right-handed pitching. I think this move is perfectly fine. It's Eric Hosmer. I mean, you can't really expect more than Eric Hosmer out of Eric Hosmer, and everyone kind of knows what he is at this point. I think it's fine as long as it doesn't stop the Cubs, because they still need another bat because their lineup's still kind of garbage on the hitting end. But for what it's worth, Cubs first basemen in 2022 were their literal worst position group. They were terrible. They hit 232. They're 304 on base. They slugged 348, and they had a combined 86 WRC plus. Eric Hosmer in 2022, when everyone thinks he was pretty garbage, which he wasn't great. You get 268. You get a 334 on base, slugged 382, and he had a 104 WRC plus. And he's projected for a 107 WRC plus. So if he's average or still just like kind of garbage, he's better than the complete tire fire that was Cubs first baseman position last year. So I think it's a total win as long as it doesn't stop Matt Mervis from getting at bats. Like if they're going to keep him like at first base, or God forbid DH him, because I don't think he provides you any value as a DH. And they're not going to give at bats to like Matt Mervis, then this is a bad move. But if it's like, okay, he sucks and they can cut bait on him, sure. But other than that, this is pretty forgettable, low risk move here because he's just making no money. Let's stay in the NL Central with an NL Central to NL Central team trade. This is the Pirates trading Bryce Wilson, who was one of the big centerpieces that they got in the Richard Rodriguez, the Dick Rod trade several years ago now is what it feels like. Bryce Wilson was one of the Braves' higher end pitching talents in their very deep farm system at the time. They've traded him now to the Milwaukee Brewers in exchange for everyone's favorite baseball player, cash considerations. yeah, Bryce Wilson's a pitcher. The Brewers will figure something out with him. I'm not too familiar with him. And the Pirates, they DFA'd him. So, I mean, they were prepared to cut bait with him. He was pretty miserable last year. Started 20 games, but didn't really do much in them.
Yeah, now that I look at it, I don't know why I included him on the rundown because he sucks.
80 grade beard, though. Pretty solid beard. Yeah, I mean, he's promising, I guess. He's still just 25 years old, and the Brewers are known for really, really maximizing their pitching. And he was a top 100 prospect at one point. So there's the talent's there. It's just potentially getting the right team to pull it out of him. And the Pirates very often are not the team that pulls talent out of anybody. But he had a 5.52 ERA last year, 5.06 FIP. Didn't strike like anybody out. And just his fastballs decline in velocity every year he's been in the league. He's never posted an ERA below 4, and that was like an outlier year where he literally just kind of started 6 games in spot starts. Yeah, he sucks, but maybe the Brewers can figure something out with him. They usually do well with that. You ready to move on to a former Brewer that everyone hates?
Yes.
Okay, Diamondbacks re-signed Zach Davies, known scumbag Zach Davies. 1 year, $5 million. Got $3 million worth of incentives baked in there. Zach Davies, he was fine last year, I guess. You did playing time analysis for Diamondbacks before.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just such an average pitcher. It's just so mediocre where he just doesn't strike anybody out. He just like eats some. He doesn't eat a lot of innings, eats some. He's had a couple lucky seasons where he had good ERAs because he got good BABIP numbers, but he's just a guy that has a good changeup, and that's about it. His changeup is pretty solid, 57th best CSW last year, gets a lot of swinging strikes. So that's about what he's relying on, sinker changeup type thing, not blowing it past anybody, averaging about 90 miles per hour with his fastball. So he's not really special, but he's there to just eat innings. And I think because the Diamondbacks have so many young pitchers that a guy like this is perfectly fine. It's just, a guy that's just there to make starts, which is sometimes you need that when you have so many young guys and you don't want to overwork them. You just have a guy that's like, oh, here's a guy who can take the ball every 5th day and, at least give us some sort of shot to win.
Right. The Diamondbacks pitching rotation outside of Gallen seems very dire. And I don't
What are you talking about, bro? Don't talk about Mad Bum like that.
Mad Bum is cooked.
I love me some Mad Bum.
Mad Bum is cooked. Zach Davies is not an inspiring signing for the Diamondbacks, but they're not.
Merrill Kelly was good last year. He was.
Are you banking on Merrill Kelly to be good again, Jake?
No, but he was good.
Of course.
Last year.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, Jake.
But they have a lot of good young guys. Like Ryan Nelson is
that's true.
Pretty solid, and Dre Jameson and Tommy Henry were pretty good last year. I think Jameson's pretty inspiring, and they have Brandon Pfaadt, which I'm not even sure that's how you pronounce that.
Name is
but
dope.
Yeah, so he's going to be sick. So they definitely have some young guys that could come up and make a difference. But yeah, I think hopefully Zach Davies doesn't prevent them from reaching their full potential.
I hope not. I'm not a Zach Davies fan. There's obviously the whole thing with his wife where he just kind of ghosted her. And then for a year, and then it was like, yeah, we're getting a divorce now, which is just a shitty thing to do. And then he also played for the Cubs, and he was pretty garbage for the Cubs. So I'm not a big fan of him for that. Yeah, I mean, they have Blake Walston. I forgot about Blake Walston. Yeah, they have some guys, but they need to not have a million random dudes. They're going to end up cobbling together a rotation of a bunch of the leftover guys, like Zach Davies, and then they'll get Greinke. They'll get Greinke back. 100-year-old Zach Greinke. Pretty good. Yeah. Not a whole lot to talk about here, but we're talking about it now. Back to the NL Central. The Brewers have signed their first free agent of the entire offseason. It only took them until a new year, a literal new year. Today, actually, they signed old friend, I guess, Wade Miley, 1 year, $3.5 million deal, spent last season mostly on the IL, but with the Cubs. 1 year, $3.5 million deal. It's got a $10 million mutual option in 2024. It's got a $1 million buyout there.
0% chance that gets exercised.
No chance. No chance at all it's getting exercised. But yeah, I mean, Wade Miley he's an innings eater when he actually plays. But yeah, I don't know what else to really say about this. He'll probably be the 5th starter there, I would think.
I don't get that. They have him as the 5th starter, but then they have Aaron Ashby in the bullpen, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe he'll be a swingman. I mean, they're only
maybe he'll be injured.
Probably. Well, they're only projecting him this year to throw like 120 innings. So maybe he'll be a swingman. Maybe Ashby will suck, which is not going to happen. But I mean, he's been very fine the last couple years, especially in Cincinnati in 2021, where he posted like that 3.37 ERA, which like it's hard to pitch in Great American Small Park because if you give up a fly ball, it's a home run. Yeah, I mean, it's a good signing for the Brewers, and he was pretty good for the Brewers. He was with them in what, 18?
Yeah, and that was the year they did that whole trick play in the NLCS.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I don't hate this move for the Brewers. They needed to sign somebody because they hadn't signed anybody. But yeah, I mean, sure.
He's definitely an option, and he gets a ton of ground balls. So I'm sure they'll figure something out where he works out well. And, having that kind of depth in the rotation is important. I mean, last year you saw them lose Woodruff and Peralta in the same year. So it's definitely possible that one of their big arms goes down, and then they have, the depth of Wade Miley and Adrian Hauser and Aaron Ashby take over, and then they're still fine. Because last year we saw them collapse at the end of the year. So maybe they think having more starting pitching depth or more depth in the pitching rotation in general will keep them from having a disaster at the end of the year or something.
Yeah. But that's all we've got for the offseason transactions so far. Maybe something will happen during the pod. We can talk about that. But I think it'd be a good time now. It's 2023. Let's talk about the year 2022. How about we do a little year in review? I'll let you run through them, Jake. I've been talking a whole lot. I can't hear you.
You're right. I thought
this guy didn't want to talk at all. I muted his mic.
Yeah, I said, yeah. I thought that since it's a new year, it would be a good time to run down last year. We podcasted basically the entire year. We did 42 podcasts last year. Pretty incredible. So it was easy to go through all our rundowns and see what kind of stuff we missed. So this will be MLB 2022 year in review, and we'll just, run down everything that was notable that happened last year and give a short thought on it so that we don't spend 3 hours on this, because we can. If you've watched any of our other podcasts, that we could do this forever. So I'll kick it off with something that happened in January of last year, and that was Big Papi being elected to the Hall of Fame. I thought that was pretty cool. It was the most obvious guy, and also it meant that Bonds and Clemens and Schilling all didn't get in. So I was definitely very happy for Papi, but I think my emotions about Bonds and Clemens outweighed that.
I agree. It was bittersweet because it kind of cast a cloud on David Ortiz getting in, because everyone just complained Clemens and Bonds, and I think less people cared about Schilling, but Clemens and Bonds didn't get in. It's you're taken away from Big Papi, who deserves to be in the Hall.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then unfortunately, those negative feelings transferred into more negative feelings when the season was delayed due to the lockout. It was an awful time. Nobody knew if we would have a season at all while we waited for the MLBPA and the MLB owners to come to a deal on a new CBA. They finally did, and we all rejoiced when baseball was brought back. I mean, honestly, that was one of my highlights of the year when they announced that the season was back. That was one of the happiest moments of my life, to be honest. I was so pumped.
Oh, yeah. It's like a weight was lifted off our shoulders. It's oh, yeah, we actually get baseball. And it was just so awesome, man.
Especially for us. We were running
Oh,
out of
yeah.
stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we were. We were like brainstorming. Like we were just about to start just coming on here. I joked about it. Like, well, we needed ideas for this one. It was like, so come on, name a random baseball player. We're just gonna do that for an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We could.
yeah, we could.
Yeah. So then the season finally started and Stephen Kwan took over the entire world because he just never missed. And by that I mean he did not miss a single pitch. He never swung and missed for like the first 2 weeks of the season, and everybody thought he was going to be the greatest player of all time. He ended up slowing down, but he did end up finishing third in Rookie of the Year, and I think he quickly became everybody's favorite baseball player for the first couple weeks of the season.
Oh yeah, the Stephen Kwan podcast was like the joke for like the first like three weeks of the season. Making it hit the Kwan joke every single time because we're still going to do that. But yeah, Stephen Kwan, part of one of the best, like a really really surprising Guardians team, young exciting team.
So that storyline carried a few weeks, and this next one also carried a few weeks as the Giants kept breaking the unwritten rules, which was really funny. I forget what the first one was, like somebody hitting the ball. It was Mauricio Dubon bunting in like the 9th inning while they were winning or whatever, and then there was the I think it was Tyro Estrada or somebody trying to score or something, and then Alcides Escobar got all mad. But yeah, everybody was pissed that the Giants were breaking the unwritten rules of trying to win baseball games, and that was really funny to me.
Gabe Kapler's response to all of that was the best part about it because he was just like, "Shut up, like we're trying to win."
Yeah, he just did a big middle finger to the rest of the league. And then we got one of our many milestones of the 2022 campaign as Miguel Cabrera finally reached 3,000 hits for his career. We did a whole episode where we talked about the next players that could reach that milestone. And honestly, it was a great moment for Cabrera, especially for a guy that's really slowed down the last few years, but it allowed everybody to reminisce on an amazing career that he has put up for the last 18 or so years as a member of the Marlins and the Tigers.
Yeah, future Hall of Famer, seeing that like kind of the cementing moment because he was already going to get in, and now it's just another accolade to just notch on there for his already Hall of Fame resume. Everyone loves Mickey. Like he's one of the most universally beloved baseball players. Everyone loves Mickey. So seeing it was just awesome.
Yeah, and from somebody that everybody loved to somebody that everybody hates, Trevor Bauer was suspended in a shocking move that saw him get suspended for like 325 games, which was crazy, and that has gone by the wayside now. And by next episode, we'll know what the Dodgers have decided on in terms of whether or not to keep Bauer on the roster because he was reinstated just last week. We didn't talk about that at all. I felt like we didn't need those negative vibes on the podcast, but yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. Seeing, cause he signed the mega deal. He signed a colossal deal. It was like 3 years worth of an absolute ton of money that I don't remember that he's probably not going to get a whole lot of now cause he's been suspended. But yeah, I'm tired of talking about him. I'm tired of thinking about him. When the time comes, we will. But I'm over it. I used to like Bauer a little bit, and then this was like, okay, it's over. You know.
Yeah.
The videos on YouTube were cool. I understand he was kind of a dick on Twitter, but like he was winning me back, and it's like, oh yeah, this is happening. Like, all right, forget you, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think somebody else that probably would have been down to fight Bauer was Madison Bumgarner. He always is known for having a short temper, but this one time in a game against the Marlins, it was definitely deserved when he was being checked after an inning for sticky stuff on his hands. The umpire really wanted to pick a fight with him and just felt up his hands like he was getting a manicure and just stared right into his eyes. And Mad Bum hated that. And that was, I had forgotten about that before writing this up. And that was really one of the more enjoyable moments of the season as a Mad Bum lover, because it was just so funny. And that umpire I think everybody took Mad Bum's side for the first time ever. And yeah, it was really funny because it really worked up an entire community of people against umpires.
Yeah, this whole thing with him was weird because like I'm not a Mad Bum fan. I know you are, and I think he's a crybaby more often than not. But like this one was so deserved. Like the umpire very clearly tried to get a reaction out of him, and he got it, and he pissed off the most pissed off man that has ever been born, Madison Bumgarner. Yeah, we didn't talk about the Longoria thing. Mad Bum and Longo get to play on the same team.
True. Reunited. Yeah. So another guy that has big emotions, Josh Naylor, had just an incredible game. I forget which team it was against. I feel like it was the White Sox.
That sounds right.
It was in Cleveland, but yeah, he had just an incredible 8 RBI game where he had like a game tying hit and a go ahead home run, and he was so pumped. And I just remember that very vividly, just how pumped up he was throwing his helmet in the dugout. Just, you never seen a guy that pumped up. And I think just a week or two later, he hit a walk-off home run and was equally as pumped up. So this was definitely a year of Josh Naylor showing that he has a fire inside him.
Oh yeah, he was the first player since 1974 that had 8 RBI from the 8th inning on. So like it's like a big milestone game. Josh Naylor is awesome to watch. We're like bandwagon Guardians fans just because their team is so fun, and Naylor's part of that.
Yeah, he also did the Rock the Baby in the playoffs versus Garrett Cole. So really great year from Josh Naylor. I look forward to seeing what he does next year. For the Angels, one of the few bright moments of their career outside of Shohei Ohtani, Reed Detmers threw the only solo no-hitter of the season in a performance. I think he struck out like 2 or 3 guys. It was not a dominating performance, but he still gets to lay claim to the only solo no-hitter of the 2022 season.
Oh yeah. For a team that just can't do anything right. It was super nice to see, and he did it against a good team. I think he no hit the Rays.
I don't remember. I don't know.
Yeah, I need to look that up. I'm pretty sure that was the Rays, but yeah. Apart from Ohtani and Trout still kind of having a good season, the Angels fans had absolutely nothing to cheer for. So Detmers really, really sick.
Mm-hmm. And another no-hitter that season that might have even been more notable than Detmers was the Reds throwing a no-hitter and losing. It was just the perfect encapsulation of their entire season. I just remember losing my mind over that just because they had such a terrible season from so many aspects. I don't know if you remember, like the first month of the season, they were the worst baseball team of all time. They just could not win. And then they capped off the first half by losing a game in which they no-hit the Pirates. It's barely happened ever in the history of baseball, but it was just, of course, it was this awful team that did that.
Oh yeah. God, the Reds, they need something to go right, man. This can't happen for them. But it was a combined no-hitter, so it wouldn't have counted anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it still counts, but the funny thing is that it doesn't count because I think they only went 8 innings or whatever. I
thought that was like the 7-inning one because it was in the doubleheader.
No, because we didn't do 7-inning doubleheaders this year.
Oh my God, what am I thinking of?
I think I think they did. I think they were playing in Pittsburgh, so I think they did actually do the no-hitter, and then they just lost.
Ugh.
Pretty funny. But yeah, nonetheless,
we forgot to add this one, but the Reds had the 2 games this season. They had the one where they lost after throwing a no-hitter, and they had the one where they won on a balk off. Do you remember that?
I don't.
The walk off balk.
That's yeah. They really had an interesting season from a bad perspective for sure. Some guys who had great seasons for the first times in their careers were a bunch of rookies making their debuts and taking the league by storm. This includes the likes of Julio Rodriguez, Bobby Witt Jr., Adley Rutschman, O'Neill Cruz, Michael Harris II, Spencer Strider, and Jeremy Pena. Julio was one of the only players ever to post a 25-25 season. Bobby Witt Jr. was super underrated and starting off his career with a bang. Adley Rutschman is already looking like one of the best catchers in baseball. He really boosted the Orioles in the second half, and O'Neill Cruz just was amazing from a StatCast perspective. He hit the hardest ball of all time and threw the hardest ball of all time and was the fastest player in baseball. So it's going to be exciting to see what he does for the rest of his career. Michael Harris was a maestro in center field while also posting a near 2020 campaign, and Spencer Strider threw the fastest strike of all time, and also was the fastest player ever to reach 200 strikeouts in a season. So a lot there. And Jeremy Pena was looking incredible to start the season and then finished the season off incredibly in the postseason.
Oh yeah. All these players are super exciting. Who was your favorite rookie, Jake?
Stephen Kwan.
Stephen Kwan? I really like Bobby Witt. You talked about O'Neal Cruz being the fastest. He's not faster than my man Bobby Witt Jr. Bobby Witt Jr. He was like the second or third fastest, and he was the fastest that like regularly played. I think the fastest was like Corbin Carroll, and he only got a cup of coffee, so he doesn't count.
Yeah.
Bobby Witt Jr. is laying claim, fastest player in baseball for now.
All right. And then now to something that I actually completely forgot about until I was putting this list together. And that was when Tommy Pham slapped Jock Peterson over fantasy football. And that that took the news cycle for like 3 weeks because it included Mike Trout being the manager of the fantasy football league and all that kind of stuff. And that really took everything over. I can't believe I forgot about it. But when I saw it again, when I was going through our old rundowns, I just started laughing to myself because I was like, that was so funny. That was such a weird turn of events. And then Tommy Pham almost was a member of the Giants as well. I don't know. There were so many like weird things going on during that time. I just thought it was so funny, and Jock took it in stride. And Tommy Pham, I still like him. It was so funny.
Yeah, this was such a whack like thing that happened. That baseball is a weird sport, and this was like the ultimate baseball is weird kind of thing.
Definitely. And then I think one of our favorite parts of the year was ranking City Connect jerseys that came out throughout the year. And it was really fun to like keep adding one as we went through. We saw the Rockies reveal one. Let's see. I think we got the Nationals one this year too. The Padres one, which definitely grew on us a lot. We also got the Astros one, which looked like some pajama pants. We got the Angels one, which I now have a jersey of, and we got the Brewers as well. And the Royals. I think that wraps up all the ones that were revealed this year. But yeah, I'm loving the City Connect jerseys. I think that's the best part about them having a deal with Nike.
What was your favorite one from the year?
From the year, I think it was originally the Nationals one, but that Padres one has really grown on me. I think it's cool because it's so unique.
I'm a really big fan of like the surfer Angels one, the one that you had. I think you wore it last show. That one's dope.
Yep. Yes, it is. All right, and then we hit the halfway mark of the season, the All-Star break, where we saw the MLB draft where Jackson Holiday went with the number 1 overall pick and Drew Jones went number 2. It was a pretty star-studded class, and I'm excited to see how these guys do in their first year of pro ball. But it was definitely an interesting MLB draft, and we covered so many of the picks with like a 3-hour episode. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
We had Devin on and Isaiah. It was lit.
Yeah, that was an awesome episode. We'll do the same thing for this upcoming draft this year, but that was a really fun episode. I'm not a big draft prospect guy, so that was a change of pace for me.
Definitely. And that All-Star weekend might have been defined by the home run derby. It usually is, but this one was pretty exciting because Albert Pujols surprisingly made the finals. He kept tying the guy that he was going up against. I think it was Schwarber, and Schwarber finally fell short and Pujols got to move on. Everybody crowded around him to give him a break during one of his rounds too. He faced Juan Soto in the finals, but ultimately came up short as Juan Soto was the home run derby champion.
Oh yeah, one of the best home run derbies ever. I'm not a Pujols fan, but would have been cool to have seen him win it.
Yeah, it was definitely cool. Was that
Soto should have taken a dive. Soto sold. He should have taken a dive.
Where was that?
Oh, where was the
Colorado?
Was it?
I think it was Colorado.
I think that sounds right.
Because I remember being excited for how far they were hitting the ball. MLB All-Star Game. It was in... Come on. I want to tell me easier. Wikipedia is saying that it was at the Dodger Stadium.
That's right.
So it must have been the Rockies last year. Yeah, but that was definitely cool. And then I think something that might have actually trumped that was the players mic'd up at the All-Star game. That was one of the sickest things that happened this season. I think everybody remembers Alek Manoah being mic'd up, talking to John Smoltz while striking guys out on the mound. It was awesome. And we got the Nestor Cortez and Jose Trevino talking to each other while they were pitching to each other. That was super cool. I think that was definitely the best development from the All-Star game, because the All-Star game has gotten to be really boring now that it has no ramifications on home field advantage in the World Series. So with the new mic'd up players, you really get to see personality from these players and get an inside look on, what's going on the field. And I think Alek Manoah was the perfect guy, because he's like my favorite baseball player, him and Shohei. I love Alek Manoah.
Yeah, that one was really cool. I hope they do that more. And they do that in spring training too. I wish they would do that more during regular season games, but I understand why they don't. I just think it would be good for the game.
Definitely. And then we had a crazy trade deadline that saw players going every which way. The biggest team at the deadline was the Padres, as they acquired Juan Soto, Josh Bell, Brandon Drury, and Josh Hader at the deadline. It took them all the way to the NLCS getting all of those guys, but it was still an absolutely insane deadline, because they got, the biggest guy in Juan Soto, and then they didn't stop there and got Josh Hader too. There were so many big trades. There was also Luis Castillo going to the Mariners as well, but the Padres really made their presence felt at the 2022 deadline.
Oh yeah. One of the crazier trade deadlines that we got to talk about, Juan Soto, obviously one of the brightest young stars in the game. The Josh Hader one was also kind of a surprise to me. But yeah, I mean, the Padres, they are always really aggressive. So seeing stuff like that, really nice. Next thing on the rundown for the Padres, not so good news. Fernando Tatis Jr. shortly thereafter was suspended. Was it 80 games for violating the substance abuse policy? He was suspended for performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate. I remember when it happened, and I couldn't believe it at first, and I thought maybe it was a mistake, and then I sort of had to come to accept it. And I think I wanted to do everything I could to defend him, and I think everybody was really disappointed in him. But there's a lot to go around about that, and it's definitely been the talk of the town, as it forced him to miss the entire season after he missed the first part of the season with injury. So it was a really disappointing, especially following that super exciting deadline.
Yeah, I think disappointed in him is the exact right turn of phrase.
Yep. And then a bunch of managers were fired this year. I think we had Girardi for the Phillies fired. We had Charlie Montoyo for the Blue Jays fired. We had the Joe Madden with his mohawk fired for the Angels. And I think we also had the Rangers manager, Chris Woodward, fired. There might have even been one more. Everybody fired except for the guy that might have deserved it most, Tony La Russa, who just had a really weird season, walking guys with the bases loaded with 2 strikes, that kind of stuff. It was definitely a weird season of managers, and pretty crazy though that the one of those teams made the World Series, with the Phillies making it there with Rob Thompson.
Yeah, we talked about it almost every single time, that like when you fire a manager, it doesn't do anything to change your team, and the one that would have actually done something to change your team didn't happen. Tony La Russa got to manage the entire season, despite being a senile old man.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, pretty exciting, entertaining to see him there the whole year. Another entertaining thing was watching former number 1 overall pick Mark Appel finally make his debut. I think this is like 10 years or something, after he was drafted. It's been a whole up and down career for him as a pro baseball player, dealing with all kinds of stuff, but it was really cool to see him make his debut, and he was actually pretty promising out of the bullpen for the Phillies.
Yeah, that was one of the coolest things. I had read about the story. I think they had it in a Sports Illustrated or something like that, like a long time ago. So seeing him finally make his debut all this time later was just like special.
Yep. And then another special first was Alyssa Nakin for the San Francisco Giants, becoming the first on-field female coach to appear in a baseball game. That was pretty cool. I'm pretty sure she just coached first base, but it was cool to see the sport moving in that direction, especially now that we have a female GM and we have female managers in the minor leagues in the Yankees organization. So I think this is a great step towards equality in terms of gender in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, they took her her batting helmet when she was the first base coach, and it is in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So
Let's go.
that is going to be enshrined there forever. It is a shame that they had to do it in the ugly City Connect jerseys, but
Yeah. It's also a shame, too, that we lost legendary broadcaster Vin Scully. As a Giants fan, it's easy for me to say that he is the greatest of all time. He was just so incredible. He broadcasted for so many decades, and he had so many stories, and he did it so well. And every game that he broadcasted was so incredible to listen to, and it's really tough to lose such a great person like that.
yeah, I mean, he has probably the most, like the voice most synonymous with baseball.
Mhm.
And he's just a legendary broadcaster, one of the greatest sports broadcasters in general, not just baseball. And it's huge loss to the game to not have Vince Scully anymore.
Yeah, rest in peace. The Mets also rest in peace because they got hit by pitches at a record rate in 2022. They were complaining about it at the beginning of the season, but this is something you could have seen coming with the additions that they made to their team, adding Starling Marte and Mark Canha to a team that already got hit by a ton of pitches. They added the two guys that got hit by more pitches than anybody other than like Anthony Rizzo. So it was sort of expected, and they came through and they set the hit by pitch record.
Yeah, they set it in like the middle of September with like a lot of time left to go too. What a weird record to be broken, but there's always one of those in every year.
Mhm.
Always a weird record like that. So I'm glad the Mets got it.
Another record that was broken was actually a really interesting one, and that was Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina setting the record for most games uh, played together as a battery. So as a pitcher and catcher battery, they broke some Tigers record from the 1960s or 50s or whatever. So they've now played the most games together between a pitcher and a catcher. And I think that is really cool, especially because it's something that it's not like, oh, like this happened one time and this is really cool. It's like something that took a whole career and it took two players doing it together. You don't really see records like that happen that often. And I think it was really cool to see that. Might have been not as cool for you.
Yeah, it was whack. I hate both of these guys. But this happened between two of the teams that I absolutely hate the most. Me and Cubs fan, it was Cardinals and the Brewers. But seeing something like this is awesome, and a big kudos to Christian Yelich. He just completely almost stepped out of the box and just let it come across the plate, so they could just have a clean baseball to take to Cooperstown. I really, really appreciated that. Class act.
Sick. Yeah. And one of the most heartwarming moments of the season was Stephen Vogt finishing off his career in style. Not only did his children announce him for one of his final at-bats in the Oakland Coliseum, but he also hit a home run in his last at-bat and was completely losing his mind. It was super awesome, especially because he also began his career, his first at-bat was a home run. So he started his career with a home run, ended it with a home run. This is just an everyday guy, just a ball player, a guy that, seems like a really great guy, and that's why Oakland fans loved him. So it was a great send-off for a very great baseball player.
Oh yeah, one of the coolest moments of the season last day. His kids announcing him was like a tearjerker, but it's like it's happy tears. So
yeah,
big congratulations to Stephen Vogt, awesome guy.
Yeah, another awesome guy. Shohei Ohtani followed up his unanimous MVP campaign with what might be considered an even better season in 2022. Unfortunately, he didn't win MVP, but Shohei Ohtani is, with these two seasons, is looking like the best player that ever played baseball, and we're so incredibly lucky to be able to watch this.
Yeah, if not for Aaron Judge, he would have been MVP 2 years in a row. And he can stake a claim as long as he does pretty much remotely close to what he does like this year and the last. He should be in the MVP conversation literally for his entire career.
And speaking of Aaron Judge, one of the two most followed storylines throughout the entire season was Aaron Judge breaking the American League home run record by hitting 62 home runs, breaking Roger Maris's 61-year-old record from 1961. It was super exciting. I think it was cool that he was on pace like from the very start of the season, so people were watching it the whole year. Of course, it was a Yankee, so everybody was losing their little minds over it the whole year, and he just had an incredible second half, and it was a bonker season from him, and very cool to see somebody hit 60 home runs for the first time since Barry Bonds.
Yeah, this is an awesome moment. I really liked, my favorite part that came out of this was you got the Foolish Baseball hat on. I don't know if you watched the Year Judge video, but they referred to the record as being held by Roger Maris Jr.'s dad.
Yeah, I love that.
For making all about himself.
That guy sucks.
Yeah, that guy does suck. So glad we don't ever have to hear about him again.
Yeah.
Aaron Judge, awesome record. Got super paid in the offseason too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then the other major home run storyline was the great Albert Pujols reaching the 700 home run threshold, finishing with 703 home runs for his career. Super great. He was my favorite player growing up. It was super disappointing to see him fall downhill, but I love that he finished his career off on a high note, and he is going to be he might be the second 100% Hall of Famer after Mariano when he finally reaches eligibility in 10 years from now, 5 years from now. Yeah, it was super awesome to see him rejuvenate his career and just have an incredible second half that saw him reach that incredible barrier that only he, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, and Barry Bonds have ever eclipsed.
Yeah, this was super cool for Pujols to get to. Also had the cool milestone. He got to pitch for the first time in the majors. We didn't talk about that one. He finished a game, which I thought was very great. But yeah, 700 home runs for the machine, Albert Pujols. We talked about it a little bit before the year. Oh yeah, he has no chance of getting to it. And then it's just he absolutely popped off. The baseball gods willed it into existence.
It was sick. Yeah, he definitely was on steroids.
I feel like they juiced the ball for him, and nobody cares. I feel
Judge,
they could. Well, even for Judge, I think people would care more. If MLB came out tomorrow and was like, "Yeah, we juiced the ball back to the 2020 ball for Albert Pujols," everyone would be like, "Okay," and everyone wanted him to get that.
He still did it. Yeah, another crazy record that was broken, more of a drought, was the Mariners finally breaking their 21-year-long playoff drought, and it all culminated in a Cal Raleigh walk-off home run that secured it. It was super incredible. A great call by Dave Sims on that one. That is a moment that will live in Mariners infamy for a very long time. So it was really cool to see the Mariners finally reach the playoffs for the first time since 2001.
Yeah, I think the Mariners were everybody's second favorite team this year. Just hoping that they'd be able to break the playoff drought. They finally did in storybook fashion. It was just special. I've said that so many times. This was one of the most special moments of the entire season.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one of the themes that sort of weaved its way throughout the entire season was the Braves just extending everyone. This started from the preseason and went all the way through this current offseason. And, the likes of Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Michael Harris II, Spencer Strider, Austin Riley, they just Vaughn Grissom, they extended literally everyone, and every single time I said they can't keep getting away with this, and they kept getting away with it.
Yeah, that's extended into the offseason as well with the acquisition of Sean Murphy and extending him too. It's getting old. I wish they would stop it so we don't have to keep talking about it.
Yeah. And then we had a really, really exciting postseason that included tons of big moments. We had the Oscar Gonzalez home run that ended I think it was a 17 or 18 inning game. He walked it off did it send them to the next round too?
It did.
Yeah, that was sick.
Oh yeah, that was super sick. Just like this next moment. I mean, we're going to talk more Phillies, but Rhys Hoskins hitting the home run against, I think he hit it against the Padres in the epic bat slam, one of the coldest home run celebrations of all time doing in the postseason.
Yeah, I love that. It was super sick. Yeah, I think it's definitely going to popularize the bat slam as opposed to the bat flip.
I'm a big bat slam guy. Bat flips are cool. That one was dope. Bat slam was awesome.
Yeah. And then I think my favorite moment of the postseason was the Harper home run that sent them to the World Series. That was awesome. We've been waiting for Harper's signature moment since signing that huge contract with the Phillies, and that was clearly it.
Oh, yeah. I'm one of the world's biggest Bryce Harper guys, and this was the crowning moment for him. He's going to win a World Series before it's all said and done. They'll get back there. They didn't get it done this time, but awesome moment that you can play on repeat forever if you're a Phillies fan.
Yeah, and we also had the Yordan Alvarez home run. I think it was a comeback against the was it the Yankees that were in the ALCS?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, he had just a crazy big home run. Maybe that was against the Mariners. I can't remember when that was. He had multiple home runs in the postseason that were huge, but there was that one where he just they like walked a guy ahead of him to get to him, and he just blasted the home run. There was that kid who was crying too. It was definitely a memorable moment.
Jordan making that kid cry. Awesome move.
Other way around. The kid was
yeah.
crying, and then he made him stop crying. Yeah, and then also probably one of the coolest moments of the postseason as well was an umpire having the first ever perfect game according to scorecards. That was pretty cool. I forget what the guy's name was.
It was Pat Hoberg. Pat Hoberg
Nice.
is the GOAT. Yeah, perfect game. First ever 100% accuracy, ball and strike calls. That was my favorite moment, best moment of the postseason.
Yeah, that was sick. And then we also had the Chas McCormick catch in the World Series where the Phillies were mounting a comeback, and Chas McCormick made an amazing catch at the wall and had his whole outline of his body in the dirt the next day. It was an incredible catch that I don't think anybody saw coming at the time.
Oh no, this sucked the wind out of the Phillies. This one was a heartbreaker.
Yeah, it did happen before the Real Muto home run. I think that was the night before Real Muto hit I think it was a walk-off. At least, no, it was a go-ahead because it was in Houston, but he hit a go-ahead home run after Nick Castellanos saved the game with a diving catch, and that was definitely a signature World Series moment for Real Muto.
Oh, yeah. He's still the best catcher in baseball, and I think it's by a pretty big margin. This is a really clutch moment.
And then we had what will go down in history as the third ever no-hitter in the postseason, the second ever in the World Series. The Astros threw a combined no-hitter, which was definitely like, what is going on right now? It was definitely interesting. I don't think I was rooting for it, but yeah, you could definitely see the Phillies were losing hope at that moment.
Oh yeah, you want a quick bit of cool trivia about that no-hitter, Jake?
Yeah.
There's been 3 no-hitters in postseason history. Dusty Baker has been part of 2 of them. He has been on the receiving end once and on the winning side once.
Nice. Pretty crazy. And that all culminated in the Astros winning the World Series for the second time since 2017. Jeremy Pena was the World Series MVP after he was also the ALCS MVP. So a really incredible way to cap off a great rookie season from Pena, and the Astros just cemented their legacy as one of the best franchises of the 21st century.
Yeah, I think we talked about it before it happened earlier in the year. It's safe to call the Astros a dynasty? I think both of us said no, and now I think it's both safe to say that we can say yes. Yeah, this was a great season of baseball, great moments all around. Excited for what 2023 season has in store. Hopefully it can live up to 2022, because 2022 was an excellent year of baseball.
Yeah, I know. It didn't even end with that, because it bled into what has been a really exciting free agency that also will sort of be a precursor towards the 2023 season. So I think it's good time to run down what has happened in free agency for every team. We'll read off the players that they signed, and we'll say who we thought the best are. Maybe not best, but our favorite signing for each of those teams. And we'll do a more in-depth review of the offseason as a whole for every team later on in the offseason.
Okay, so starting off with the Arizona Diamondbacks, they are the first alphabetically. That's how this is going to work. We talked about Zach Davies signed for a 1-year, $5 million deal. Evan Longoria signed for a 1-year, $4 million deal. Miguel Castro signed for a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. And Scott McGough signed for a 2-year, look out, $6.25 million deal for the Diamondbacks. What was your favorite move of this illustrious month?
As much as I want to say Evan Longoria, I think I got to go with McGough, because he seems like the most interesting. I'm a big lover of relievers, and he's coming from overseas and had some success over there in Japan. So it'll be really cool to see if he can translate that success to the States.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on McGough, just because of the unknown factor a little bit. It's just cool when those guys come over, because you want to see them do well, and the Diamondbacks kind of have a good track record with that, with Merrill Kelly. So be cool to see. Moving on to the Atlanta Braves. they signed Jordan Luplow to a 1-year, $1.4 million deal, and they signed Nick Anderson to a 1-year, $875,000 deal. What was your favorite of these two excellent moves that they made?
Yeah, well, the Nick Anderson deal gets them multiple years of control there. So that's why he's making so little. As much as I don't like him as a person, I think that's definitely the better baseball move. He's definitely got some potential still left in his arm, and that bullpen affords him the opportunity to not be relied upon as like the big guy in that bullpen.
Yeah, I like Luplow. I think Luplow's got potential. He's typically like a righty lefty masher. So they'll platoon him in the outfield. And they had success kind of doing that with Adam Duvall for a little bit. So maybe they can figure something out with Jordan Luplow and get him to do that again. But I don't know. I don't like Nick Anderson as a person enough to be like, yeah, that's my guy right there. So
Exactly.
I'm going to go with Luplow. Onto the Orioles. They signed Kyle Gibson to a 1-year, $10 million deal to add to their rotation. They also signed former Seattle Mariner and Padre and Pirate Adam Frazier to a 1-year, $8 million deal, and they signed Michael Givens, former Oriole, coming back home for 1-year, $5 million deal. Which is your favorite of these moves?
I think it's got to be Adam Frazier, though. None of them are super inspiring, and they sort of spent more than I would have expected on all of them. Givens is pretty solid, but I think Adam Frazier will be the most helpful there, although it's hard to say that. I think he's got a pretty empty bat, but we talked about it earlier when we were talking about Ryan O'Hearn, that the Orioles have had somewhat of a confusing season as a offseason, as a team that seemed to be on the come up, and they haven't really made the splashy additions that you would expect for a team that wants to take that next big step.
Right. I think I would like Gibson the most. I mean, he had kind of a bad season last year, but his underlying numbers were a lot better than what he ended up posting. It's a 1-year deal with the intent of if they're bad again, they can flip them at the deadline, just like with the rest of these guys. But their rotation was so bad on paper that I think their number one starter, since Means wasn't going to start the season, was like Dean Creamer or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, probably got to sign a starter, and Kyle Gibson can hold down the fort maybe. On to Boston, staying in the division. They signed New Japan. I want to say New Japan. That's the wrestling. That's the wrestling organization. Nippon Professional Baseball standout Masataka Yoshida for a 5-year, $90 million deal. Signed Kenley Jansen to 2-year, $32 million deal. Justin Turner, another former Dodger, just like Kenley Jansen, 2-year, $21.7 million deal. Corey Kluber to 1-year, $10 million deal. Chris Martin, lead singer Coldplay, to a 2-year, $13.5 million deal, and Joely Rodriguez to a 1-year, $2 million deal. I think we both have the same opinion on which one is our favorite signing. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think it's Masataka Yoshida, because he was just awesome. He hits a bunch of home runs. He's kind of a miserable fielder. He walks twice as much as he strikes out. That's just pretty dope. I know you like that. That's like my favorite things when guys walk. Yeah. Plus he's another NPB import, and we want to see those guys do good because it's like a new face instead of retreads like Turner, Jansen, Kluber, and Chris Martin.
Totally agree. I think I'll say Turner, because he's finally going to leave the Dodgers, so I'll actually be able to appreciate him as a player. So I think that's one of my favorites, because I think he's a pretty underratedly amazing bat.
Yeah, I like Turner's bat too. I also like his absolutely excellent ginger beard.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago Cubs are next. They signed Dansby Swanson to a 7-year, $177 million deal. They signed Cody Bellinger to a 1-year, $17.5 million deal. Jameson Taillon to a 4-year, $68 million deal. Drew Smyly to a 2-year, $19 million deal. Tucker Barnhart, 2 years, $16.5 million. Brad Boxberger for $1.28 million. And they signed Eric Hosmer to a 1-year deal, making the league minimum. I'm a Cubs fan. I really like the Dansby Swanson signing, because if they didn't sign one of the big shortstops, that fans were probably going to burn Wrigley Field down. So yeah, this was the signing they needed to make, and he's good. He's got excellent hair. He's got excellent glove. They can make a good middle infield defense. They still need to sign a bat, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'm most excited for Bellinger. I think that was my favorite signing, not only for the same reason as Turner, is that he'll be getting out of Dodger Stadium and I'll be able to appreciate him more, but also I think he's got the most potential out of everybody that was on the free agent wire. He's a guy who could be an MVP or be a non-tender candidate again. So it'll be really exciting to see what he can do for the Cubs.
Oh, yeah. Staying in Chicago this time, it's going to be Andrew Benintendi signing with the White Sox for a 5-year club record $75 million deal. Mike Clevenger also signed with them for 1 year, $12 million. I don't like either of these signings, but I think I'm going to go ahead and say that I like Clevenger more than Benintendi. Benintendi had a breakout season in air quotes. He kind of had a good first half that still wasn't all that great, and he was helped by a very heavily inflated BABIP. Mike Clevenger has cool tattoos, cool windup, long hair, and he throws gas. So I like Clevenger more than Benintendi here, but I'm not inspired by either of these guys really.
I agree. I love Clevenger. I think outside of some controversy that he had during the season, that he's a really fun player. He seems like a cool guy too. And I
Best
not
nickname in baseball.
Yeah, Sunshine. I'm not a huge fan of the Benintendi deal. Not only the dollar value, but also just I don't think he's going to be a huge difference maker for the White Sox, but we will see. So yeah, my favorite's Clevenger.
Yeah. The Cincinnati Reds signed a couple of guys to play baseball. Is the best way to describe it. They signed Will Myers to a 1 year, $7.5 million deal. Kirk Casale for 1 year, $3.25 million, and Luke Miley for $1.18 million. I think my favorite of these deals is actually Kirk Casale, just because he's a really good clubhouse guy. He's a really good defensive catcher, and their big building block around their team is Tyler Stevenson, and I think he can help Tyler Stevenson grow into an even better defensive catcher.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I'll just go with Will Myers then. I think it'll be cool to see if he can recapture his bat playing in Great American Ballpark, and for the low price of $7.5 million, I think that's worth it. So it'll be cool to see if he can become a valuable trade chip in the same vein as Brandon Drury last year.
Absolutely. The Cleveland Guardians, Indians, signed Josh Bell to a 2 year, $16.5 million deal, and they also signed Mike Zunino to a 1 year, $6 million deal. Who's your favorite of these two?
I think it's clearly Josh Bell. I don't have too much faith in Zunino. So Josh Bell is a guy who I really like because he doesn't strike out a lot. And I think he really fits well into the theme of the Guardians, where they don't strike out a lot. And I think they needed a big bopper in their lineup, and he really fits that bill perfectly.
I completely agree with you, and I don't have enough to say about Mike Zunino. So I think we're just going to move on to podcast favorite Colorado Rockies. They signed Pierce Johnson to a 1 year, $5 million deal, and they signed Jose Urena, a guy that likes to throw baseballs, at Ronald Acuna Jr. to a 1 year, $3.5 million deal. I do not know almost anything about Pierce Johnson, and I don't like Urena, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the offseason that the Rockies have had thus far. And yeah, Pierce Johnson strikes out a lot of guys, but he also cannot throw strikes. So that's him. And Jose Urena doesn't throw strikes on purpose. So there's that. The Rockies are actively being bad, and they're paying $8.5 million to do so.
Awesome. Sounds good to me. I was trying to look up stuff for Pierce Johnson really quick, but oh, hey, I like Pierce Johnson because he throws fastball hard and he doesn't spin it, and that plays in course. So I'll go with Pierce Johnson. The Detroit Tigers signed Matt Boyd, bringing him back home. 1 year, $10 million deal. And they also signed Michael Lorenzen for 1 year, $8.5 million, trying to bolster that rotation. Both of these guys are retreads, taking flyers on them to try to fix their rotation, which was not good last year. Skubal had his moments. Eyes was up and down, and Erod was fine. But yeah, what are your thoughts on these two guys?
I love to see Matt Boyd back in town because he was so successful with them before he left, and didn't do much the past couple of years. So I would love to see him get back to the success that he had just a few years ago. But maybe Michael Lorenzen will finally become the two-way player we've been hoping him to be.
I doubt that. Michael Lorenzen does have impeccable shoe game. Yeah, Matt Boyd, he's fine. I mean, He has been pretty good for the Tigers in the past, so hopefully he can recapture a little bit of that. Moving on to the defending champion, Houston Astros, they signed Jose Abreu to fill the void at first base, 3-year, $58.5 million deal. They re-signed Michael Brantley, who did test the open market, but they got him back, 1 year, $12 million, and they got Rafael Montero, 3 years, $34.5 million. Which one's your favorite of these moves?
I think my favorite is the new one, Jose Abreu. The other ones are obviously good to keep your guys in town, but Jose Abreu should be pretty exciting on a forward thinking and smart organization like the Astros, but also with the Crawford boxes there in left field. I think he could really pump those power numbers up a lot after hitting like 15 home runs last year.
Yeah, I'm still really, really high on Brantley. He struggled with injury last year, but before he got injured, he had posted a line where he walked more than he struck out. He had a 1.2, or he had a 127 WRC plus. He already put up 1.2 WAR in like 60 games, and he's just going to basically be a full-time DH. But he's a contact bat that adds to that lineup that just gives him an extra element. I really like Michael Brantley. Moving on to the Kansas City Royals, they signed Jordan Lyles to a 2-year, $17 million deal, and they signed Ryan Yarbrough, former Tampa Bay Ray, weird arm slot guy, to a 1-year, $3 million deal. What are your thoughts on both of these guys?
Not inspiring at all.
They play baseball.
Yeah, I don't have too much confidence in the Royals being good next year, and the fact that Jordan Lyles is now their ace increases that feeling even more. So I'm excited for Ryan Yarbrough if they use him as a swingman or with an opener. I think he could be pretty interesting. But yeah, the Royals aren't doing much to make them competitive next year.
Yeah, Jordan Lyles is a thrower of baseballs. He eats innings. But yeah, the Royals are bad, and they're going to continue to be bad, is what I would have to say. Moving on to the Angels, they signed Tyler Anderson to a 3-year, $39 million deal. Brandon Drury to a 2-year, $17 million deal, and they signed Carlos Estevez for 2 years, $13.5 million. What are your thoughts on their free agent signings? Because I think they've had quietly a pretty solid free agency.
And they made a lot of trades too, so I'm excited to see if they can finally be successful. But surprisingly, I'm going to go with my favorite being Carlos Estevez. I think it's really going to be exciting to see him leave Colorado for the first time. He throws really hard, and the Angels don't really have a lockdown closer, so there's a possibility that Estevez has a breakout season and takes over as the Angels closer, which that would be really cool and would make them look really smart. And so yeah, I'm excited to see them hopefully turn a former terrible Rockies guy into a really good Angels guy.
Yeah, I think I'm excited for Drury just to see how their lineup is going to work and what they're going to do with Rendon. I think that's the biggest thing that I want to see is if they're going to put Drury at second or if they're going to try to put Rendon at second, because Rendon's body's kind of breaking down a little bit. I don't know. Drury had a breakout season last year, and he struggled a little bit with San Diego, but it is it's a different experience trying to hit in Petco compared to Great American Small Park. So I don't know. Maybe Drury will still be pretty productive for them, but even if he's not, it's not that expensive a contract. I really like the Drury signing. Moving on to Jake's favorite baseball team, the Los Angeles Dodgers, re-signed club legend Clayton Kershaw to a 1-year, $20 million deal. They also signed Noah Syndergaard, Thor, who Jake also really likes. Also signed JD Martinez, 1-year, $10 million deal. Syndergaard's, I don't think I said his is $13 million. Martinez is 1 year, $10 million, and they also signed Shelby Miller for 1 year, $1.5 million. Which one of these is your favorite new Dodger, Jake? Which one do you think is going to be the worst for the Dodgers? Because I know that's what you're going to pick.
I'm not going to go with a new one. I'm going with Kershaw. I think that's my favorite signing, keeping him in LA so I can continue to hate him.
Yeah, I don't really like it. I like the Kershaw signing just because it's Kershaw, and I don't want to see him play for anybody that's not the Dodgers because it would feel weird. I like the JD Martinez signing. It feels like an absolute steal to get that guy for $10 million. He's still very productive. He's old. He's going to DH every single time because he can't play a lick of defense. But yeah, I like the Martinez signing for them. Miami have signed one player, so I think we're going to have to pick the same guy here, Jake. The Marlins signed Gene Segura for 2 years, $17 million. Who's your favorite guy that the Marlins signed, Jake?
It's a hard decision, but I think I'm going to have to go with Gene Segura. They definitely needed some help on the offensive end, and this was one of the few guys still left that knew how to swing a bat. So they really didn't have too much of a choice, but it's nice to see the Marlins actually doing something when they've had such a quiet offseason.
Yeah, I like the signing for them. I don't like the weird decision that supposedly they're gonna go with and play him at third. I feel like that's a little strange. But yeah, I mean the Marlins haven't really done anything. We talked about how a little disappointing it was that their general manager, how do you pronounce her name again?
Kim Ng.
Kim Ing. Yeah, that's right. I didn't want to be wrong. Kim Ing hasn't really done anything else other than just kind of stand pat with their team, which kind of sucks. But yeah, Gene Segura is a cool clubhouse guy. He's always smiling. So I don't know. Maybe he'll bring some fun to Miami. The Milwaukee Brewers have made their first signing. We talked about it earlier, and it's Wade Miley. They signed him for 1 year, $4.5 million. If you missed the start of the show, yeah, he's a thrower of baseballs. I don't know where he's going to fit, but Jake talked about him mostly probably being a depth guy, fifth starter or something.
Yeah, no reason to rehash what we said earlier.
Exactly. So moving on, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Twins. They signed Joey Gallo for 1 year, $11 million, and they signed Christian Vasquez, one of the better defensive catchers on the market, for 3 years, $30 million. Who's your favorite of these two signings, Jake?
I've always been a big fan of Joey Gallo, so I'm excited to see him hopefully recapture what made him one of the better players in baseball for the first few years of his career. So hopefully he can do that in Minnesota and show some big power and a really solid glove.
Yeah, I'm a huge Gallo guy as well. The Twins, if they can keep everybody healthy in that outfield, they have a really good offensive and defensive outfield. If they can just get a bounce back from Gallo and a little bit of a bounce back from Kepler, 1 year, $11 million is a steal for someone with the potential that Gallo has in that bat. As long as Joey Gallo plays baseball, as you see the memes where it says like, if they have one fan, it's me. If they have no fans, I'm dead. That's me for Joey Gallo. So hopefully he has the best season of his entire life for Minnesota and hits 84 home runs. Moving on to big spenders in New York. New York Mets. They signed Justin Verlander for 2 years, $86.67 million. They signed Carlos Correa to a 12-year, $315 million deal. It's got an asterisk next to it that Jake put in the rundown because that's still up in the air. We don't know if he's actually going to sign there because there's still the question mark about his physical, which is very weird and nobody knows anything about right now. They also signed Brandon Nimmo to an 8-year, $162 million deal. Edwin Diaz for 5 years, $102 million. Kodai Senga for 5 years, $75 million. Jose Quintana, 2 years, $26 million. David Robertson, 1 year, $10 million. Omar Narvaez for 2 years, $15 million. Adam Ottavino, 2 years, $14.5 million. And Danny Mendick for 1 year, $1 million. I need to take a break to breathe, so I will let you talk about it first, Jake.
Yeah, they really had a big offseason, spending a lot of money. Verlander got the highest AAV ever, and Correa got a massive deal. Edwin Diaz, I think, broke the record for relievers, and Kodai Senga is coming over from Japan. So there's lots of guys to choose from. I think I'm going to go with my favorite one being retaining Edwin Diaz because, you can't let him go somewhere and bring those trumpets with him. And he is one of the best closers, if not the best closer in baseball. So I'm really excited to see him back there. And it's going to be really exciting to see what level he takes that entrance music to next year.
Oh, yeah. I think the one that I'm the most excited about for them is maybe Correa, just to see like what's even going to happen with him. Because I'd have to imagine if he actually does sign, he's going to mash. And if he doesn't, he's going to go somewhere else where he's going to go there and mash. So for the time being, I'm going to pick Correa. If in the future he does not stay with the Mets, I'm going to say Kodai Senga just because the same reasons that we had for like Masataka Yoshida and other guys that we've talked about already. He's a Japan import, so everyone wants to see how he's going to do over in the States. On the other side of New York, however, the Yankees retained Aaron Judge. They kept him on a 9-year, $360 million deal, one of the biggest in baseball history. They also signed Carlos Rodon for 6 years, $162 million. Anthony Rizzo for 2 years, $40 million. And they also got back an old friend, Tommy Kahnle, for 2 years, $11.5 million. Which one's your favorite here, Jake? A lot on the Yankee side, not quite as much as the Mets.
No, but they still spent a lot of money.
Yeah,
Like you
they still
said, the
spent a
Aaron
ton
Judge
of
being
money.
the largest free agent contract in MLB history. I'm really excited to see what Rodon does, and will still be a fan of his because he played for the Giants the last couple of years, and he's really good. And I think he's going to make the Yankees rotation one of the best in all of baseball. So I think that is probably my favorite signing because the Yankees were known as like a big basher team, and now I think they will be more so known for their incredible rotation.
Oh yeah. I want to say Aaron Judge just because like we could talk about the contract and talk about him living up to expectations and everything. But I'm a Cubs fan. I personally want to talk about one of my favorite baseball players of all time, which is Anthony Rizzo. They signed him for 2 years, $40 million, which is an absolute steal for what he is. Anthony Rizzo is an awesome clubhouse guy. He's going to hold down first base for the next 2 years at a pretty cheap rate. I mean, $20 million for a guy like this who plays Gold Glove defense, gets on base all the time. Has an excellent smile, and he's the greatest leadoff hitter in baseball history. I love Anthony Rizzo, so hopefully he can succeed again this year. On to the Oakland Athletics, who did not spend a whole lot of money like the previous two teams that we talked about, but they did spend a little more than we thought the Oakland A's to start of the offseason were going to. But they signed Aledmys Diaz for 2 years, $14.5 million. They signed Trevor May, noted Twitch streamer, 1 year, $7 million. Jace Peterson, noted guy that plays baseball, 2 years, $9.5 million. And they signed Drew Rosinski coming back over from the KBO for 1 year, $3 million. Who's your most excited talk about guy for your hometown Oakland Athletics?
I would say that it would be Trevor May because I think he's actually going to be a pretty solid closer for the team, and I think seems like a cool guy to have on your team, just like as a person. But I think I'm more excited to see what Rusinski has. I really know nothing about him, so seeing him come over from the KBO and immediately slot into the rotation where he has a lot of space to pitch there, I think it could be pretty successful and should be pretty interesting to see if he flounders or not.
Yeah, I'm really interested by Drew Rosinski. He was an insane ground ball pitcher in KBO, which is a super offensive environment. Um, it's basically like the level of AAA, especially like parts of AAA too, where they just hit a cajillion home runs. That's basically exactly what it is. But Drew Rosinski, he had like a 64% ground ball percentage or something last year. Like he just gets a ton of ground balls. He's got a really nasty slider. I'm really all in on Rosinski being good. And if he's not good, I mean, they didn't spend hardly anything to get him, as the A's are quite apt to do. But we skipped one big spender. We'll talk about another one. So the Philadelphia Phillies have added to their big coffers of players to try to get back to the World Series and finally win. They've added Trey Turner on an 11-year, $300 million contract. They signed Taijuan Walker for 4 years, $72 million. Craig Kimbrell for 1 year, $10 million. And they signed Matt Strom for 2 years, $15 million. Which one of these guys is your favorite? Because I already kind of know who it's going to be.
Yeah, Trey Turner is one of the best players in baseball, and I think it's really cool that they were able to add him to an offensive core that is already one of the best in baseball. So it's really going to be exciting to see how they defend their National League pennant with Trey Turner now in that lineup.
Yeah, since you chose Trey Turner, I think I'm going to go ahead and say Craig Kimbrell, human heart attack closer. Depends on where they're going to put him in their bullpen, because I think Dominguez is probably the closer as of now. But if they're going to put him at the closer role, I think he'll be fine. If not, I think he's going to be garbage again, because that's just how Craig Kimbrell works for some reason. I don't get it. But yeah, I like Kimbrell. Hopefully he can figure it out, and maybe he'll be the saving grace to Philly's long-term dumpster fire bullpen. Staying in the great state of Pennsylvania, we'll talk about Pittsburgh Pirates, who signed one of the baseball community's favorite baseball players, Rich Hill, Dick Mountain, for 1 year, $8 million. They signed Carlos Santana for 1 year, $6.73 million. Signed Austin Hedges for 1 year, $5 million. Vince Velasquez, two-way player, for 1 year, 3.15, not 3.5 million. They signed Harleen Garcia for 1 year, $2.5 million. They signed a bunch of old retrade guys for something. I don't know what the Pirates' plan is, but who's your favorite of these old retrade guys?
I love me some Carlos Santana. He walks a lot and he doesn't strike out a lot, and that has always made him one of my favorite players to draft in points league fantasy teams. So I will always like Carlos Santana, even if he's on terrible teams like the Pirates.
Oh yeah, he got traded last year? What was the terrible team that he was on last year?
He was on
Was he on the Royals?
Royals, and then he went to the Mariners.
That's right. That's right. I'm gonna go with Vince Velasquez. I mean, I think there's a little bit of gas left in the tank there. He's only 30. The rest of the guys like that they picked up are older guys or guys that have not really had a ton of success. Like Harleen Garcia has kind of been, he's been like a weird straggler in the league. Santana's old. Rich Hill is super old, and Austin Hedges is bad at anything related to hitting. Velasquez, he's like a weird kind of like Phillies retread. I don't know. Maybe they can figure something out with him. I think he's the biggest upside get that they have. Let's talk about San Diego Padres, who we talk about all the time on the pod because they are always doing stuff, and that is very, very apt to talk about with their free agency recap. They signed Xander Bogaerts away from the Boston Red Sox on an 11-year, $280 million contract. They also signed Robert Suarez for 5 years, $46 million. Nick Martinez for 3 years, $26 million. Seth Lugo, 2 years, $15 million. And they signed Matt Carpenter, 2 years, $12 million. In their bid to try to win a World Series. They lost in the NLCS last year, and they add big, spend big too.
Yeah, I feel like they spent a lot of money on some guys that they probably didn't need to spend that much money on, but I think I'm pretty excited to see what Matt Carpenter can do in San Diego after he rejuvenated his career last year. It would be pretty disappointing if that was all we got out of him and then he sort of sucks the next 2 years, but there is a possibility that he just adds to that team and makes them absolutely crazy next year. So I think that's my favorite signing.
Yeah, you stole my signing because I thought you were going to talk about Bogaerts. So I guess I'm going to talk about Bogaerts. It's okay. I want to talk about Matt Carpenter's awesome mustache. Bogaerts is very good. He's just really good at baseball. He's obviously the big ticket signing. He posted not a career high in average, but it was like the third highest average of his career last year. He's gotten better defensively every single year. He doesn't strike out all that much. They are going to try to play him at shortstop, which I believe is a weird choice, but whatever. Yeah, Bogaerts is just really good. He's going to be 30. They're going to be getting the prime of Xander Bogaerts, who adds an extra element to this offense. That's just going to be really, really good next year. He's the big ticket for San Diego. Seattle Mariners did not really sign a big ticket guy. They got Trevor Gott on a 1-year, $1.2 million deal. So you can talk about Trevor Gott because I don't know
thank you.
about Trevor Gott.
No, thank you. Former Giant. Yeah, I don't think there's much to say here. They really went the trade route this offseason, as they are wont to do.
Baseball. Trevor Gott. Is he good at anything? Oh, okay. No, he isn't. All right. Anyway, San Francisco Giants. Talk about former Giants. Talk about the current Giants. They re-signed one of my favorite baseball players, Jock Peterson, on a 1-year, $19.65 million deal. They also signed Michael Conforto for 2 years, $36 million. They signed Mitch Haniger for 3 years, $43.5 million, which is probably the biggest signing that they made in general. Sean Manaea as well for 2 years, $25 million. Ross Stripling on the same exact contract, and Taylor Rogers for 3 years, $33 million. You're the Giants fan. I'll let you go first.
I'm excited to see Mitch Haniger. I got my brother a Mitch Haniger jersey from the Mariners because it was only $15 for Christmas. So I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table for the Giants. Hopefully he can protect his ball sack, and then he should have a pretty great season.
Yeah, for Mitch Haniger, that was just an absolute miserable break he got last year. I'm excited for Taylor Rogers just because we talked about it last podcast, how they can go from Tyler to Taylor. 8 and 9, which I think is the best. The St. Louis Cardinals signed absolutely nobody, so we're going to skip them. They signed Wilson Contreras away from the beloved Chicago Cubs of me for 5 years, $87.5 million, and I'm not going to talk about it, so you can.
Sure. I think this is like the ideal move if you were only to make one move in the offseason, is to just get like one big guy like this and then stay quiet elsewhere. Because if you look at all the other teams that made one move, like the Marlins getting Segura or Brewers getting Miley or Mariners getting Gott. None of those are inspiring, but getting like filling the hole that was left by Yadier Molina was definitely the way to go. And they got the best guy out there. So I think really solid signing there. And I think he should fit pretty well there and will probably be a menace to the Cubs for the next 5 years.
Probably so. The Tampa Bay Rays also only signed one guy, and apparently he was the big ticket because he was the first one of the first real dominoes that fell in free agency. Zach Eflin goes to the Rays for 3 years, $40 million. And this was, I wanted to say this was like a head scratcher this was like their biggest free agent contract ever that they've given out. One, it's dirt cheap. It's like 3 years, $40 million, which is absolutely nothing for a free agent nowadays. And Zach Eflin, that's such a weird thing, but it's the Rays, and they're typically a franchise that prides themselves on being smarter than everybody else, so they'll probably turn him into an ace, which is going to be something else.
Yeah, I'd still love to dive into this one a little more to try to get a better understanding of what they saw here to give him a record contract. But yeah, still cool to see him go there, and I'm actually really excited to see what they can make out of him.
Oh yeah. What if they just like turn him into a closer and he's just like lights out? That'd be something else. The Rangers signed one of the biggest free agents just in general. They got Jacob deGrom for 5 years, $185 million. Is an absolutely gargantuan contract. They also re-signed their all-star from last year, Martin Perez, 1 year at $19.65 million. Add to their rotation with two more guys. They got Nathan Eovaldi, 2 years, $34 million, and Andrew Heaney for 2 years, $25 million. This is like just their whole rotation now. So it's like just signing free agency. Who's your favorite of the bunch?
I think it's obviously deGrom. I think that was my favorite signing to get the big ticket starting pitcher name out there. Was really cool for the Rangers. They've been spending a lot of money the past 2 years. The rotation was awful last year. This is going to be the biggest boom or bust rotation you have ever seen.
Oh yeah. Go back and watch all the podcasts where I've talking to and read all the articles where I talk about apparently my favorite baseball player is Nathan Eovaldi. I'm going to talk about him again. I think if you're talking boom or bust, and if they can stay healthy, if he can stay healthy, I think he's the number 2 starter in this rotation, even if Martin Perez is still healthy again, unless he's back to the all-star form, which I don't imagine is going to be the same thing. Nathan Eovaldi refuses to walk anybody. When he's on his day, he will strike everybody out. He just needs to figure out what he had with his slider and his curveball last year. I think that's the biggest thing. Struggle with injury, struggle with inconsistency as well. I really like Nathan Eovaldi. Very serviceable guy. You've seen him do work during the Red Sox postseason run. I'm a Eovaldi fan. Always will be. Same thing with Gallo. Apparently, Nathan Eovaldi is one of my favorite baseball players for some reason. I keep going back to him. It's not on purpose. It's just Eovaldi, man. Toronto Blue Jays. We talked about them earlier because they fired their manager, but they signed new guys and made a bunch of weird trades that we'll talk about later or at some point. They signed Chris Bassett, who was one of the bigger free agent pitchers on the market, 3 years, $63 million. They also add, I was going to say a bat, but he's not much of one. It's Kevin Kiermaier, 1 year, $9 million to go, man, at center field at Rogers Center in Toronto. This is quite the free agent haul, sort of, not really.
I'm excited to see my boy Chris Bassett pitching on the north side of North America, leaving the A's. He will be beloved, I'm sure, out there as he was as an A. I think he's a very underrated pitcher, and he definitely adds some solid reliability to that rotation that was really lacking last year as they dealt with injuries and ineffectiveness from marquee acquisitions.
I'll talk Kiermaier for a little bit. I think there's still a little bit left in him. He's obviously not much of a hitter, but this is, if there's one or a few teams that you can afford to not have a hitter in, this lineup is probably still one of those. Kiermaier is a pretty good glove guy, and they can save George Springer and push him either into left or right. So I like this move just from that standpoint, from getting able to save George Springer's body, who was their big ticket acquisition a couple seasons ago. I think that's the whole deal with Kiermaier. Nothing really else to talk about that. And our last team is going to be the Washington Nationals, who are going to be bad, but they signed a couple interesting guys. Trevor Williams is their only deal that's longer than 1 year, and they signed him for 2 years, $13 million. Signed Jeimer Candelaria for 1 year, $5 million. Dominic Smith, we talked about him earlier, for 1 year, $2 million. And Erasmo Ramirez for 1 year, $1 million. Who's your favorite of this lovely bunch of players that the Washington Nationals have cobbled together to play baseball for them?
I think I would have been most favoriting Dom Smith if we haven't already talked about him, but I'm really excited to see what Candelario can do for the Nationals. He's had a couple pretty great years before this year. He's a doubles machine, and so I think he'll fit really well there, and he'll have all sorts of playing time for a terrible Nationals team. So I'm excited to see if he can be really good and hit the open market next year as one of the more coveted free agents.
Yeah, I've talked about it before, but I like Trevor Williams, and I'm interested to see what Trevor Williams can do when he's not going to be pushed into the Trevor Williams role, which everyone knows is he's going to be a swing man, but mostly like a reliever, like for like 80% of the year, and then he's going to make like 5 spot starts. I think he was perfectly fine with the Cubs when he actually did start. And then they pushed him into the pen later, and then he got hurt, and then he got traded because the Cubs sold everybody. I would like to see what Trevor Williams can really do when given the chance, because he had pretty good numbers last year in like 90 or so innings with the Mets. Didn't make too many starts. I think it was more along the lines of like 8, 9, 7, something like that. It was single digits. I know that much. But yeah, I mean, his contract's dirt cheap. He's got an awesome tattoo on his arm. It's really cool Raven. So, get to see that if you're a Nationals fan. I guess that's something to look forward to. His dad's cool, comes to all of his games. And he's a cool guy on Twitter. If you're a Nationals fan, go follow Trevor Williams.
Oh, yeah.
We have talked forever on this long podcast, which is more along the lines of how long our normal ones are. But I think it is perfectly good time since I just talked about a pitcher, but he's a starter. We need someone to close out the podcast from the bullpen. And I think Jake just has the right guy. So I'm going to hand him the bullpen phone and let him make the call.
Yes, I do. And this one was suggested by your very own Davis. We've got Ted Abernathy in to close out the 43rd episode of Free Baseball. Ted pitched for 14 years from 1955 to 1972 as a member of the Senators, the Indians at the time, the Cubs, the Braves, Reds, Cardinals, and Royals. He debuted in April of 1955 against the New York Yankees, locking down 2 outs, allowing only 1 hit, 1 earned run, no walks, and a strikeout. He had an awful debut year as a swingman that year with a 5.96 ERA, and then he tossed just 30 innings in 1956 because he was not too great. And then he was even worse somehow in 1957 as a swingman. He pitched to a 6.78 ERA, so not the best start to his career. And then he tossed just 3 innings from 1958 through 1962 because he underwent shoulder surgery, and he also was recovering while pitching in the minor league. So he missed a lot of time. And prior to that surgery, he was pitching at a 3/4 angle with his arm. So that's about here. After being an over-the-top guy in his college days. And then after that shoulder surgery, he was forced into a sidearm motion that also saw him sometimes feature the first ever submarine pitch, throwing from a super low angle. And that was the reason Davis suggested him to close out this podcast. And that weird angle that he pitched from actually brought on a lot of success. He caught on with the Indians in 1963, and he never started a game again. That season, he tossed 59 1/3 innings with a 2.88 ERA and 12 saves, and then he followed that up with 72 2/3 more innings with a 4.33 ERA and 11 more saves. He was sold to the Cubs prior to 1965. This was back before free agency, and players could just be bought and sold, which was really weird. And he had a career season in 1965, tossing a career high 136 1/3 innings with a career high 104 strikeouts, a 2.57 ERA, a career high 31 saves. That also led the entire major league. And he also led the majors with 84 games and 62 games finished. He was then traded to the Braves. I think so. It was mid-season of the 1966 campaign. And then I think he was sold to the Reds prior to 1967. His Wikipedia is not as thorough as you would expect it to be. So he was with the Reds for the 1967 campaign, which actually might be considered the best year of his career. He tossed 106 and a third innings that year with a 1.27 ERA, which is a career best. He also had a career best 0.98 whip, and he saved an MLB high 28 games, led the National League with 70 games, and he led the majors with 61 games finished, and he actually finished 20th in National League MVP voting that year with that incredible relief season. And he kept it going. In 1968, he tossed 135 and a third more innings with a 2.46 ERA, 13 saves, and a National League leading 78 games. He landed back with the Cubs in 1969. Nice. And then he played for 3 teams in 1970, the Cubs, the Cardinals, and the Kansas City Royals. And he racked up saves throughout that time. And then he racked up 23 more saves for the Royals in 1971 before finishing up his career in 1972 with a 1.70 ERA in his final season as a 39-year-old. And so that wrapped up a career that saw him accrue 15.9 baseball reference WAR across 1,148 and a third innings pitched with 765 strikeouts, a 3.46 ERA, a 1.40 whip, and 149 saves, which is good for 91st on the all-time saves leaderboard. There he is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really wanted to talk about this guy just because he was like the first submarine pitcher. So without Ted Abernathy, you don't have guys like Kent Tekulve. You don't have guys like Chad Bradford. You don't have guys like Darren O'Day, Brad Ziegler, and the one we talked about today, Tyler Rogers. So I just thought this was a cool one. We do a different closer every time. If you haven't watched the podcast, we're now through 43. We're not scraping the bottom of the barrel, but we're getting weird with it. And I thought submarine pitcher would be perfect guy to do it.
Oh yeah, definitely a interesting one.
Oh yeah, and this was episode number 43 of the Free Baseball Podcast. Check back with us every Wednesday at 9:00ish, or wherever we eventually start putting these on streaming platforms where you can just listen to them whenever. But yeah, I mean, I'm Davis Bird. You can follow me on Twitter at DVSBird. It's on the screen if you are watching it. I'm joined, as always, by Jake Crumpler, baseball man extraordinaire. You can follow him on Twitter at Jake Crumpler. Super easy as well. It is also on the screen at the bottom if you can see it. Plug all your stuff, Jake.
Yes, I write for theathleteshub.org along with you, which you can follow at athleteshub on Twitter. We have tons of articles coming out at the beginning of this year. I think it's like every single day for the first week and a half or 2 weeks. And so you can look forward to our Hall of Fame predictions coming out next week, or maybe it's this weekend, coming out really soon. And then we'll also
Saturday.
have way too early predictions. There we go. Yeah. So get pumped for that one. There is a lot of stuff to read and it's all very interesting. If you like Hall of Fame or historical baseball stuff, then you'll definitely want to give that a read. You can find all of my other work at crumplerbaseball.com, where you'll find all of our past podcasts, as well as all my other work at the other websites I write for, like pitcherlist.com and baseballhq.com. I should be having a lot more stuff coming out for PitcherList, and Baseball HQ is a paid service, but you can check out all of my playing time analysis for the Diamondbacks, Giants, and A's there. But yeah, it was a great year last year, and I'm looking forward to a even better second year of the Free Baseball Podcast. I can't believe we survived.
I know it feels like a lot. We do this typically every week. We're getting better about actually being on schedule. We kind of had a streak where we were terrible with it, but yeah, make sure you check back with us every Wednesday around 9:00 Eastern Standard Time. That's of course. But yeah, good pod. If you want to follow the Athletes Hub on Twitter as well, you can follow them at Athletes Hub and check out all those articles. We're all linked with them too. Read all of our stuff. And the biggest part about us specifically is we're not like a big, super huge sports memorandum, anything like that. We are sports fans first. and we're kind of approaching things from a sports fan perspective, and it's talking like real people to you instead of like just a mass media outlet. We're fans just like you with opinions just like you. So you can come argue with me on my Twitter, or you can argue with Jake on his Twitter, or any of the other guys on the Athlete Sub. Don't do that, and don't tell them that. And if you do, don't tell them that I told you to. But yeah, I think that's all for today.